Hey, Todd Ault here. I'm so happy to present you this keynote speaker from our Risk On Business Conference. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
We're going to bring him out. We're going to bring him out now, a little early, but before I release the stage to Brian completely, it's really important to understand that Brian's available to you. Brian is an entrepreneur who wants to help people and makes himself available. He has charted his own course with one of the great entrepreneurial success stories of our time. In 1978, he imported 6 pairs of sheepskin boots from Australia with the dream of building a business where every American would eventually wear a product. This is how one of the most recognizable brands in the world began, as UGG products, exceeding $1 billion in each year of sales in the last 6 years. Today, Brian enjoys entrepreneurial business professional journey, success sharing his lessons, and learning while branding the UGG brand. Please join me in welcome Brian Smith.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, buddy.
Well, I've been here 2 days. I've seen some great speakers, and I've noticed one theme that runs through them all, which is like perseverance. And that's what my normal talk is about. It's called the Power of Perseverance. And today I'm going to be sharing a bunch of stories about building the UGG brand that illustrate perseverance, but I'm also going to marry that with another thing that lately so many people have been asking me, Brian, how do you start $1 billion brand? And the short answer is you can't, because it takes 2 things. It takes a disruptive product or service, which you can control. You can hire a team of engineers to make a big program that does something fantastic or invent a new product. You can do that part. But the other half of the equation is that you need some sort of societal shift in the world. It has to be worldwide societal shift to take whatever it is that you've developed and take it out to the market. And because it takes so long to develop and get to the market, you can never predict what's coming down the pike in 10 years as far as the shift that'll take your product and go with it. So I want you to come back with me now. 42 years ago, I hate to say it, but I had just spent 10 years in Australia studying to be a chartered accountant, and I finally graduated, and I quit the same day because I hated accounting. And I was sort of, hanging out in Perth, which is Western Australia, and for a couple of weeks trying to figure out what am I going to do. And but I wasn't feeling very urgent about it. And one afternoon I was driving home and I heard this song on the radio, and I didn't even go home. I went straight by my house, straight down to the record store, and I bought the first album of Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, first that I'd heard. And the words of the second song were, and then one day you find 10 years have got behind you, no one told you when to run, you missed the starting gun. And I just got covered in goosebumps. And I thought, oh, shit. I thought about all my friends who were tracking off to partnerships in the accounting world, and other friends who had started a business straight out of high school, and they'd been doing great, and I felt like I'd been running on the spot for 10 years. And so around about that time, I just discovered meditation because I bought a book on yoga. And so I was meditating one morning, and I was thinking, okay, what can I do? And after 10 or 15 minutes, I got goosebumps again, and I thought, oh my God. I was thinking all the big trends are coming out of California, Levi jeans and waterbeds and, surf brands, skate brands and all that. And I thought, I'm going to go to California and I'm going to find the next big thing, and I'm going to bring it back to Australia and make my fortune. And so after a few months, I ended up in Los Angeles and rented a little house in Santa Monica. And I had my surfboard and a suitcase basically when I arrived, and I went straight up to Malibu because I had been reading surfer magazines since I was 7 or 8 years old, dreaming of surfing Malibu. And so I spent like a month up there surfing and meeting a ton of people, and I didn't find the next big thing. A few months went by, I was still surfing up there, making lots more friends. and I still hadn't found the next big thing. But then one day, the weather pattern changes every October, and the first storm comes in from the north, and Californians think, oh, it's winter, right? It's just the way it happens. And anyway, the wind was chilly and the water was cold, and I finished surfing and I was pulling on my sheepskin boots that I'd brought from Australia. And I got goosebumps again, massive goosebumps. I thought, oh shit, there's no sheepskin footwear in America. And 1 in 2 Australians had some sort of sheepskin footwear. So I said to my buddy Doug, I said, man, we got to go into business, man. We're going to be instant millionaires. And I know what you all think of that. You've probably had that feeling. So we got back to my little house, did a little bit of research, called up a factory in Western Australia, Country Leather, and spoke to the owner, George Bircher, and he agreed after a while to let us be the distributors for his product in Western Australia, or in the US. And so we ordered 6 pairs of boots and sent down $500, and they finally arrived, and this is what they looked like. That brown stuff on the top is glue. All the stuff around the bottom sole is glue. There's no heel counter. There's no binding on the top. But that was the state of UGG boots at the time. And I use this slide because I don't know if any of you are in the process of building or starting a new something, and you've been working at it, and it's been 6 months, and you're not going to put it out yet because it's not perfect, and keep working on it, but it's not perfect. I want to tell you that don't wait till it's perfect. Get it functional, get it out, because the best feedback you're ever going to get is from those first customers where it doesn't work properly. And that will accelerate you getting your product right to where it should be. So anyway, Doug went on the road. I was an accountant. I was terrified of sales. And so he went on the road, came back after a week, and he had about 150 business cards from every single shoe retailer in Southern California. And he said, and no orders. He said, Brian, they tell me we're crazy trying to sell sheepskin in California. And it sounds logical, but I knew it wasn't the real answer, because Australia's climate is exactly like California. So it had to be something else. And so when you're an entrepreneur and you hit a wall like that, you have to think laterally or pivot. That's the current favorite term right now, pivoting. And so we thought, well, how come all my friends up at Malibu think this is the best idea in the world? And it struck me, oh my God, so many of them have been down to Australia on their surf trips, and they bought 4 or 5 pairs of boots back for their buddies. And so within the UGG community, or the surf community, UGG was a really big name. And so Doug and I decided, okay, well, let's go hit the surf shops. And this time he insisted I go on the road. And I can remember driving from my house down Santa Monica Boulevard to Con Surfboards, is the closest surf shop. And I walked in with this little bag, and I was real sheepish, and I pulled it open, and he goes, oh, UGG boots, man, what are you doing with those? They're great. I said, well, I'm thinking of importing them into America. He goes, oh my God, you're going to make a fortune. Those are the best things. I've got a pair, all my friends have got them. And so I walked out of that store thinking, well, this sales isn't so bad, Went to the next one, and he says, open the bag. Oh, UGG boots, man, what are you doing? I said, and the same thing. Oh, you're going to make a fortune. And so I went all the way down the coast from, Malibu all the way down to San Diego. And Doug was doing the San Fernando Valley, and he was getting the same reaction. All the surf shops were stoked. And it didn't occur to us that we didn't ask for any orders. I mean, what was the point? We didn't have any inventory. But this highlighted the fact that, oh shit, we need to get some inventory. And so just by a pure fluke, I was talking with Doug in the kitchen, and my roommate overheard us, and he said, there's someone at my office looking for investments. And so just like that, we raised $20,000, which in today's money is about 75. And we knew that we will never need any more money than this ever. This is the greatest fundraising. No business plan, no nothing. We just got a check, right? So we sent $15,000 down to Australia and ordered 500 pairs. And we waited for a month, and finally they arrived in the early December. And we got them all, picked them up from the customs area at the airport and took them home and stacked them all in 500 pairs in the 3rd bedroom in my little house. And we went back on the road. This time we had big duffel bags full of products, order pads, and I can remember driving down to Con Surfboards, and I walked in with this huge bag, and I said, "Hey, Eric, how many do you want?" And he goes, "Oh, well done, Brian, but man, we couldn't sell them in our store. We just sell surfboards and trunks and flip-flops, and they're way too expensive for us, but you're going to knock them dead in the shoe stores." I thought, uh-oh. And the next store, same thing. Next door, same thing. And Doug was getting the same reaction all the way out in the San Fernando Valley. And so after the week of visiting all the stores, we regrouped in my little bedroom, and we tallied up the orders, and we actually, there were so few, we hand delivered them. And this is the bank deposit slip for the first year's sales of UGG. Okay, 28 pairs. Right? Just a fluke that was $1,000. So you can imagine that was rather disappointing. But here's the lesson that I got out of that. Years later, I ended up writing a book called The Birth of a Brand. And the theme of the book is that you can't give birth to adults, right? Every business that you see listed on the stock exchange in the Wall Street Journal probably started out with $1,000 or less or more, But everyone who starts a business first conceives it and then takes the first action, and that's the birth. So the birth of UGG was buying 6 pairs of samples. And then it just lies there. Every business, every idea, it just lies there. And you've got to keep feeding it, changing the diapers, jiggling the cradle, and it just lies there. And occasionally you'll get a giggle out of it, but it is the time when most entrepreneurs give up because they think, I had a great idea, I did everything right to launch it, it's not doing anything. But if you can last through that infancy, it'll start toddling. And that's cool because you've got magazines writing articles about you. You've got the first true believers are telling all their friends how cool your product is. And you can sort of start to generate some really good business there. And that quickly goes into youth, which is by far the best phase of every business because you've got consistent orders and the sales is working, production's working, warehouse is going great. And you can run a $25, $30 million company in that infancy. In that youth, but if it's a really great product or service, you're going to hit the teenage years, and you can all probably remember wanting to be at every party on a Saturday night in town, right? It's the same in business. You want to be in every major trade show, you want to be in every big box retailer, and it's the quickest way to kill your company if you just let that growth get out of control because you can't finance the growth in that way. So the lesson from that was you can't give birth to adults. And do you think that would have been a good time to give up? Hey, 28 pairs? But I couldn't because I got 478 something pairs in my bedroom and all my investors' money tied up, So Doug went and got another job. I went to swap meets and street fairs, and the best thing I had going for me though was after Christmas, I would just show up at Malibu. I'd get there at 6 in the morning, I'd surf, grab a coffee, and then I would open up the back of the van for business in the parking lot. And I developed this amazing clientele that everybody says, oh, Ugg boots, yeah, the guy up at Malibu's got them. You should go check them out, And so I ended up with about 6,000 in sales that, January, February, March before summer came along. And so my first summer job was scraping boats at Marina del Rey. And then that fall, I thought, okay, I'm going to advertise. So I hired 2 really good-looking models, a guy and a girl, and we posed them on the beach at Wind and Sea, which is in La Jolla, and had the perfect hair and the perfect clothing and the perfect sunset and the perfect boots, you know, like way up in the main part of the ad. And ran the ads, and the sales that next season went to about $10,000. And I couldn't understand why. It should have been way more than that. So my next job was in construction up in Beverly Hills for the summer. And in September, October, I just said, okay, I'm going to hire better looking models and a more expensive photographer. Right? So we posed them on the beach again down at La Jolla, and the perfect hair and perfect everything and the perfect boots. And the sales went to about $20,000 that year. And I was just flabbergasted because I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And so the next summer I was working as a greenskeeper on a golf course in San Diego. And I loved this job, but I decided over the course of that summer that, you know, the boots are expensive. Americans don't get them. They're sort of hard to inventory. You know, and I just thought, this is too hard. I'm just going to get rid of all the product, and I am going to, you know, go out of business. And so this time I thought, well, I'm going to advertise, but I had a beer with one of my surf shop owners, and I was telling him, you know, I'm doing this all the advertising is, you know, nothing. It's gone from 10 to 20, and he says, oh, shut up, Brian. And he calls out the back to all these little 12, 13-year-old grommets who hang out in the store, and he says, hey, what do you guys think of Uggs? Every one of them just went, oh, those Uggs, man, they're so fake. Have you seen those ads? Those models, they can't surf. And like instantly I'm thinking, oh my God, they're right. These are the most fake ads that I've ever seen. And I was embarrassed at how bad they were. I mean, as much money as I spent to create them, I was embarrassed about how bad they were. So laterally thinking again, I called up a buddy of mine in Orange County who ran a Scholastic surf team, and he gave me these 2 guys, Mike Parsons and Ted Roberts, who were going to go pro soon. So instead of hiring a big photographer, we just went surfing down at Trestles Beach, which is in San Clemente, and Black's Beach, which is in La Jolla in San Diego. And these are iconic walks. They're a mile long, fantastic surf. And I just shot, you know, photos of us walking back to the beach and, you know, just hanging out on the beach. And I ran those ads, and the September, October, November issues of Surfer magazine. I call this my Tadpole Story, by the way. And the sales, when I ran these ads, the sales for that season to December went to $220,000. Why? Because this is when I figured out marketing and advertising and branding. Because your brand is not your trademark registration, right? Your brand is not your logo. Your brand is not your product, right? Your brand is what consumers think of you and your product, right? And I figured out that every little kid who reads Surfer magazine in the entire country would absolutely die to be walking down the beach at Black's Beach or Trestles with Mike Parsons and Ted Robinson. And that's when I figured out how to get the emotion into advertising. And so the rule is you never advertise your product per se. You advertise the features, the benefits, the feeling, anything that is touchy-feeling that comes with it, that you can advertise. And the more you can get emotional about it, the more successful the ads will be. And so the lesson that I want to bring out for this is that, believe it or not, this is my most important piece of philosophy, and feel free to take photographs of these slides because there's some really good philosophy in them. Another way of saying this is live in the now, okay? You can as entrepreneurs, we're all programmed that there's no finish line, you know? We can get done with one thing and goddamn, it should be, you know, we should be satisfied, but I'm not, and what's left, I've got to do something else with, that's unfinished. And I remember when I sold UGG eventually, you know, made millions of dollars, and like 2 months later, I'm sitting around thinking, shit, is that all there is? There's got to be more. So we've got to program ourselves to live in the now, and this statement here is probably the most important statement that I've come across in all the days of my you know, business. So let's jump forward now about 3 years, 4 years of doing about 1.5 million in sales now. And believe me, this is the worst period for any business. 1 million to 2 million, because you're too small to be big and you're too big to be small, and it's a bitch. And the only way to get through it is just to keep working at it, right? You know, there's no magic formula to make it all easy. And this is where the real rubber hits the road for entrepreneurs. You're either going to make it or it's going to be too hard. In order for me to grow, I had to get more money. Remember that $20,000 that we raised at the beginning? Well, we blew through that in year 2, and then we had to get, sales started to grow more. The investors I had weren't big enough to buy more inventory, so the new investors that I got didn't want the old ones, so I had to buy them out. So it was just like a nightmare, because I never really understood finance. I knew accounting, but I didn't understand finance and how it played. And so I was always chasing money to get production orders. And so this time, we've got 3 new guys in Anaheim, Neil, Paul, and Joe. And we're all going to share the company 25% each. And they're going to put up all the money, and they're going to run the warehouse and the shipping, and I'm just going to be on the road selling, which I by now had come to love selling, so I was stoked with this arrangement. And so we spent a whole bunch of time, moving all the inventory up to Anaheim, and we finally, over the weekend, got it all sorted out, and I headed down the road to Beach Boulevard, down to Huntington Surf and Sport. And I walked in, and James says, "Hey, Brian, I heard you sold the company." And I went, "What?" I got to segue here, backtrack a bit, because part of the deal I forgot to mention was that even though I was going to be the sales and we were all going to share at 25% each, I didn't get my stock certificate issued until I finished this little trademark lawsuit that I was working on, which I knew I was going to win. So it's an important detail, because when I walked into Huntington Surf and Sport and he said, "You sold the company," I went, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I just called an order in. They said you don't own the company anymore." I said, "You're kidding me, they said that?" And I couldn't wait to get out of there, and I went next door to the Shell gas station on the public phone, and I called up Anaheim and said, "Neil, what the hell are you telling people?" And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're telling me I don't own the company." He says, "Well, you don't." I said, "Yes, I do. You're my 3 new partners." And he goes, "No, you don't get your stock certificate issued on da, 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 da." And I hung up, and I drove back to San Diego, and I pulled out the contract, and I read it. I reread it, and I went, "Oh, shit. Technically, I don't own any of the company." I just went into this huge depression. And for 3 days, I just moped about the house. I didn't speak to anybody outside for 3 days, just my wife. And it was on the 3rd night of this that we were watching TV. I was lying on my back on the floor. Laura's up on the couch, and the show finished, and I turned it off, and I rolled over onto my stomach, and I got up on my hands and knees and started crawling to the bedroom. And Laura, who's a really quiet person, she just looked at me and said, "You get up now and walk to bed like a man." She scared the shit out of me. And like as I was coming up off the floor, it was like coming out of a fog. And I thought, oh my God, there's so much more to life than this crappy little sheepskin company. And so the next morning, that night I slept like a baby, and the next morning I wake up, I'm back to Mr. Positive, Brian Smith again. And so I started meditating, and I thought, okay, what am I going to do with my life now? And I thought, well, business broker maybe, real estate no, accountant never. And then suddenly I got this massive dose of goosebumps again. I'm going to segue here. Raise your hands if you get goosebumps. Right, every hand should go up, correct, right? Here's my take on what goosebumps are, right? God is not out there at the end of the universe somewhere trying to create, control us, right? I've come to believe that there's a fragment or a spark of God in every single one of us, especially in me, because I can feel it at times. And it somehow has a mission that it wants us to accomplish in our lives. And every time we make an action or a thought that's in alignment with that mission that it has, it sends us a message. And the only way it can get to us is through this electrochemical system we have called a body, and it comes out as goosebumps. So I want to challenge you all, next time you get the goosebumps, and you will, just stop for a second and think, oh my God, what did I just think or feel or say or witness? And you'll be amazed at how many times it's something important. So why did I get the goosebumps? I thought, sales. I've come to love sales. Now what can I sell? I thought, oh my God, UGG boots. I love Uggs. I want to get a pair on every person in America. So I ate humble pie, and I called up the guys at Anaheim and I said, look guys, I may never own this company, but I want to commit to you that I'm going to go on the road and I'm going to try and get a pair of UGG boots on every single American. And so we agreed that they would not tell anybody I sold the company. So it was business as usual, right? So I hit the road, and I was out there for a month and came back, and Neil handed me an envelope, and I opened it up, and it's a check for $5,000. He says, that's your commissions. And I went, shit, that's the first money I've ever pulled out of this company. And I came back the next month, and there was another check for $10,000, and the next month another $10,000. And I was out there having a blast with all my friends, either surfing with them or playing golf in the summertime. And selling wasn't selling anymore. It was just sort of hanging out and being friends. And they let me do all the ordering and the refilling and all the stocking and everything. And it worked out fantastic. And the lesson that I learned from that, which hopefully come up, it says sometimes here, but I'm going to say nearly always. Your most disappointing disappointments will become your greatest blessings. So raise your hand if in the last 12 months something happened in your family or your business, which at the time you thought was a great disaster, and now you look back and think, thank God that happened. Look at all these hands, right? That's how important this statement is. And I've got to the point now where if something goes wrong, I can just go, oh shit, that's good. Now what's good about it? And as soon as you start thinking positively, you'll be amazed at how fast you'll come up with a solution. So over the next 3 years, I put up about 1.5 million frequent flyer miles, just traveling out. We had about 30 sales reps now all over the country, and I travel with every single one of them through their whole territories, met all their major retailers, and I did this 2 or 3 years in a row. And so I had come to know all of my customer base extremely well. And it was one of the best parts of my life as far as selling goes. But when I got back to the, in that 3-year period that I was doing this, just having a blast, Neil had bought Paul and Joe out. So now Neil owned 100% of the company. And he and I had started to get really close because I was coming in every Christmas to help in the warehouse for a month, which wasn't my job, but I did it anyway. And finally Neil called me up and said, hey Brian, next Wednesday, come in the office. I've got the lawyers coming in. We're going to issue your 25% of stock. And oh man, I was in heaven. And I couldn't wait for that to come. And I remember being out the weekend beforehand, and now I've got a cell phone, you know, the size of a brick with a big cord on it. And it's Laura, and she's crying. I go, Laura, what's the matter? She goes, oh, Brian, Neil's just died. And my world started to fall. I'd been so high because we'd just bought new cars for each other, you know, the company cars, and we got life insurance policies taken out on each other. And like within a week, he dies. And so I called his widow up and I said, hey, Della, you know, she'd never stepped foot inside the UGG warehouse at all. She had no idea what was going on there. And so I said, look, I'll be up tomorrow and I'll, you know, help you work out that, you know, whatever's going on with the company. I don't know where it's at financially. And so that began the longest I think it was nearly 8 months of my life. I started commuting 5 hours a day, and quickly I went to a train in the morning, and you know, Monday morning and train back, and I was chronic sore throat the whole time, and all the time I'm trying to get keep the business going. And it was like the best of times and the worst of times. The best was that I just introduced black and charcoal colored boots, and they were flying. The reps were just writing up incredible orders, right? But the worst part of it was that I didn't have any money. There was no money left in the business, and so I had to raise money to buy all the inventory for this huge increase in sales. And so I'm going bank to bank to bank with my business plan, and they're saying, oh, Brian, it's a fad. It won't be around next year. And I go, it's not a fad. This is like our 8th year of business. Yeah, but you know, brands, they won't be here. And so that was going really bad. The other part was that George Bircher, I was bundling up all these orders to send down to George at the factory. And I'd call him up and say, hey, George, fantastic news, man. We got 5,000 pairs coming. You know, have you started yet? Well, how are you going to pay me? Don't worry, George. I'll raise the money. We'll get it all sorted out, you know. And so this went on through April, May, June, and I'm starting to get really worried because I'm getting the wrong reaction back from George. I still hadn't raised any money from the banks. And so I started thinking laterally again, okay, well, who would benefit from me staying in business? And I thought, okay, my best customers. Well, they just laughed at me, so it wasn't going to be the answer. And I thought, how about the tanneries? Their business is selling skins, and we're a huge user of skins. So I sent a business plan to 2 or 3 tanneries down in Australia, and one guy called me back, Gordon Jackson. He owned Jackson's Tannery, and he said, come on down, Brian. This is the best thing I've seen in years. Let's do a deal. And so I raised a little bit of money and flew down to Melbourne, and he took me around to the factory to all the different parts of the operation, and then we got back to his office, and I walked in the door, and on his desk is this big long plaque. It says, I reserve the right to change my mind. What the hell's that, you know? So anyway, we got down to, you know, scheduling and forecasting and figuring out how many pairs of boots we thought we could sell and how many manufacturers we needed, what skin volume is going to be needed, and it was a great day. And the next day I came in and Gordon goes, hey, Brian, you know, this is a lot of money, and you're in LA, I'm in Melbourne, you know, I can't, it's just too big a risk, I can't do it. And so I sort of had to mope about all day, and the next morning he called up, Brian, I got a friend in LA, he's going to come in and look after you, and I'll go over the books and everything. So, you know, I went back in the office, and we got all the, you know, plans laid out. And the next morning it was, oh, Brian, look, it's a family company I have, and the family don't get it. They've outvoted me, and we're not going to be able to do it. So I left Melbourne without a deal. And I got back, and the first girl I met in the office was my sales rep from the local area, and she said, hey, Brian, there's a company out here selling sheepskin boots, and they claim they're going to put Uggs out of business. I went, oh my God, who are they? And she said there's a company called Thunderwear. So I looked up the trade directory, and I mean, they sell windsurfing gear, wetsuits, and booties. I said, what are they doing in sheepskin? And I got bigger problems than that, right? And so I'm now trying to get down to the why, because September is when the first trade show kicks off, the whole shipping season for the fall in the action sports industry. And I knew that we had to, I wanted to be in the show because I didn't want to let anybody know that we were having these problems. But I knew if we went to the show and I didn't sort out the production, we weren't going to ship anything. So, I talked to my wife, and she said, we said, just let's show up and see what happens. So we set up the booth and we put out all last year's product on the tables. And then I thought, I wonder where those Thunderwear people are. So I looked up the show directory, and it looks like they're back near the toilet. So I walk over and I just stop, like 2 booths short. And there in the booth was all my black, all the charcoal, all my natural, all my sand, all my production from Country Leather with Thugs labels on the back, which I thought was rather appropriate, And that's when I knew I'm out of business, right? But I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't tell my sales staff. I didn't tell any of the customers. We wrote a record, $250,000 worth of orders, and I knew we'd be calling all our best customers on Monday saying, hey, just buy the Thugs because it's all our product, right? And so we finished the show after 3 days, packed it up. I got back home to San Diego, and my wife and I talked about, calling everybody on Monday. And the last call I made was to Gordon Jackson at the tannery. And I said, hey, Gordon, I know it's, we tried hard to make this happen, but, George has done an end run around us, and, we just can't ship. And he was sad. We hung up, went to bed, and then at like 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, and it's, hello, Brian? It's Gordon. Screw George Bircher, I'll get you all the boots you need. And just like that, we were back in business again, right? And next day I sent all the patterns down to him, and he duplicated them and sent them out to 5 manufacturers and cranked up the tannery. And we started getting, after about 2 weeks, we got 2,000 pairs on the Friday, and the next week 5,000 pairs, and the next week another 5,000 pairs. And it was comical because I'd cut half of it aside and ship it to all the accounts back east, and the other half was all the surf shop drivers came down in their own trucks because they didn't want to wait for UPS, and we were clean by lunchtime every Friday. And this happened all the way through, September, October, November, and December. And then between Christmas and New Year, everything just sort of stops dead retail-wise. And I was sitting there thinking, God, I'm so glad that we're alive. We just shipped the worst season's product ever, but it all had UGG labels, so we're alive. And then 2 really weird things happened in those couple of days between Christmas and New Year. Number one, the life insurance company called us and said, hey, we want to settle this, Neil's death, And so I went up and with the lawyer, and we got just enough money in the settlement for me to buy the UGG business back 100% from his widow. And she got all the profits for the year and everything. And she was stoked because she had no idea what she was going to do with the company. And the other weird thing that happened was that the customs broker screwed up and shipped 4,000 pairs of Thugs to me and 2,000 pairs of my UGG boots up to them. And they were in San Clemente, which is like 25 minutes. So I called the guy up and said, hey, I want to swap them out. And we did. And as I was driving back home, I started thinking, how come we couldn't keep product in the warehouse for 24 hours? And the Thugs warehouse, which was way bigger than ours, was floor to ceiling full of sheepskin boots after Christmas. And that's when I realized the loyalty of my customers was so strong nationwide that they refused to buy the Thugs, right? And they threw away millions of dollars worth of potential business. But they, because I played golf with them and knew them, they were not going to, they knew what George had done. They figured that out through the grapevine, and they just backed me. So this is how critical customer service is. And even though now we're in a world of websites and clicks and instant gratification, you must figure out a way to stay in communication on a personal level, or the most personal you can on a computer, and keep in touch with your customers. So I'm going to finish up now, because I know that lunch is the only thing between, or I'm the only thing between you and lunch. And just got two really quick stories. Who believes in karma? Oh, I love it. Sort of like luck, but I like it better. Oh, let me just backtrack here. I'm sorry about that. This is what got me through that year. And if you should take a photograph of this, you should print it out and put it on your refrigerator. Because it's similar to the most disappointing disappointments quote, but this is, each last word is like the disaster, and the beginning is a really positive way to handle it. And I've found, not just in business, but in my personal life, this has been the most important piece of philosophy that I've lived by. So let's get back to karma. I knew that we needed a really strong brand for UGG. We were huge in surfing, we were huge in snowboarding and skiing, we were big in ice hockey and all the, the indoor sports back east, but there was no big brand, so I decided I'm going to come up with casual comfort. And I knew that I had to get on I wanted to get on the front page of the lifestyle section of USA Today. And that way we could really make a splash. So we used a PR agency in Boston, and we put together a project, a whole PR project with all the press kits and everything. And we figured out how to get across to the fashion editor in USA Today, who was Margaret in Chicago. And we'd made an appointment for 3 o'clock, and we arrive at 5 to 3. And she comes running out and says, "Oh, Brian, I'm so sorry. I've double booked. I've got a conference call at 3 I have to be on. I've got 5 minutes." And our presentation was like 45 minutes. We had, the press kit was beautiful. All the support materials were perfect. And I had to think laterally, and I thought that in my briefcase was a little green folder like this, and I pulled it out, and it was just full of all of these shots of celebrities that people had sent to me from everywhere. And Neil Young, Tom Petty, Sting, Patrick Swayze, Grumpy Old Men movie, remember that? Brooke Shields. I quickly flicked by that one because nobody wears UGG boots on a red swimsuit on the beach, right? So I go straight to Heather Locklear, and Margaret says, "Go back, who is that?" And she grabbed it out of my hand, and she wrote down the name of the tabloid, because someone sent it to me from London. And she wrote down the name of the photographer and said, "Do you have a press kit?" And I said, "Yep." She said, "Great, 4 minutes." And I just looked at the girl from the PR agency and said, "We just blew that. It was like $60,000 down the drain, So the next morning, I'm on my way back to San Diego. I get into Chicago airport, and I got my coffee and USA Today. And I'm expecting nothing like that. We just met at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So we open up the front page, then I read the money page, and then I skip to the next page, and here's in the center of the page this article on UGG boots. And I opened up the next page. The entire thing was a complete expose on the entire sheepskin industry and how it related to footwear, how it related to fashion, how big it was becoming, how this was a whole new movement of footwear coming through. And anyway, when I got back to San Diego, I found that the phones hadn't stopped all day from consumers wanting to know where's a retailer in their area, and from retailers saying, "How the hell do we get these boots? We got people in the stores asking for them." And so that was one of the big lifts that happened for the UGG boot brand. And the other really lucky thing, I know I'm right on finishing time here, The other really lucky thing that happened was that I'd been sending boots to this girl, Trudy, in London for 3 or 4 years, and it was always 20 pairs or to 20 different people, all her friends, 20 different customs invoices, pain in the ass, but I did it because it was Trudy Styler, who's the wife of Sting. And one day she called me at Christmas, this is right in the year I was about to sell the company, and she said, oh, Brian, I need the biggest favor. I've just been to a seminar, it's changed my world. I need the most perfect pair of tall, sand, size, whatever, Ugg boots, and here's where to send them. Do you have a pen? I go, yep. She goes, Oprah, care of Oprah Winfrey. And we shipped the boots to Oprah. She immediately ordered 20 pairs for her staff, and then that began the relationship that over 1 or 2 years, we got into Oprah's best picks for Christmas and Oprah's favorite things. And as I said before, the societal shift that you need, we were now sort of just getting across America, but she was the shift that pushed us into the that we were already in the 20 millions. She was now into the hundreds of millions and the billions. And so these are just a whole bunch of stories I talk about from my book. And if you want a more in-depth sort of look at some of the more of the disasters that I went through, you're going to have a lot of fun reading it. So what I wish for you all is to live every day happily as a tadpole.
Ready, Brian Smith?
Thank you.
All right, so I've known Brian a while, and I'm not going to let him get off stage without answering one question. We can sit down and do this, or you can do it. All right.
Okay.
So I know you all want to go to lunch, but we're going to ask this question.
Okay.
So, Brian, why did you sell to Decker? I remember when you sold to Decker, and you've never answered the question. Now you get a chance to answer the question.
Okay. Well, I'll back up. Remember when I was selling out of the back of my van at Malibu? Well, 2 or 3 spots up was another guy with his van, and he was selling these triple-decker sandals. They were pink, yellow, and pink neoprene flip-flops, and they were triple-deckers, so his company was called Deckers. And we used to crisscross each other on the road. He'd go in and out of surf shops, and we'd joke, hey, you should buy me, you can't afford it, all that sort of stuff. Well, we went our separate ways, and he built his company, and along the way, he took on a license for Teva sandals. And when the outdoor market took off, he rode that wave and he went public on that market. And so back to me, I'd just come off this season that I was just talking about, and I knew that the preseason sales for next year was going to be 25 million. And there's no way I knew how to finance it. And so I was agonizing over how the hell, I thought I was going to go out of business. It was such a big problem, right? And so anyway, I was on my way to a big sporting goods show called the Super Show in Atlanta. And way up the other end of baggage claim was Doug Otto. And I just went, oh my God, it's perfect. His company dies every winter. We die every summer. He's got 28 to 30 million bucks in the bank from his IPO. And so I walked up and I said, we high-fived, and I said, Doug, if ever we're going to do this, now's the time. And so we had the accountants talking to each other that afternoon. And 9 months later, the sale finalized. And so I didn't really want to sell it, but I just was so inept at financing them. And back then, we didn't have like the mentor groups and the peer groups to help bring on, you need financing, Nobody said that.
We didn't know each other then.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there's so
I would have gave you some money.
So many people back then tell me now that oh my God, it's like, business 101. You need someone with a financial brain. Well, I had a great accounting brain, but my solution to growth was we did $1 million in sales, we're broke. Answer, sell $2 million, right? And it's the exact opposite. We have less money with 2 million sales than you do at once. So that was the way my brain thought. And it was a real pity that I didn't have that.
Everybody, Brian Smith, the founder of Ugg Boots.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for watching. Risk on, everybody.